7 years, 150 days of testimony. It's down to a verdict that everyone's awaiting inside the packed courthouse behind us. We're outside Paris Central Courts in the center of Paris for this special edition. François Picard with in the company of Andrew Hillier. Andrew, the Paris attacks trial coming to its conclusion.
Yeah, that's right, Francois. Well, back in September, remember the famous opening remarks of the presiding judge when he said, "You will have to be patient." Now, more than 9 months later, here we are, 9 months later. It's, of course, the judges who have the final say in the courthouse behind us. Now, there's been a delay in proceedings. The last we heard, the courthouse was completely packed. It normally has a capacity for around 500 people, but today there's not a single seat going spare. And that's simply because everyone has been filing in to get to listen to those verdicts. Everyone from survivors, victims' families, lawyers, and the world's media filing in to hear one of the most anticipated verdicts in French legal history after an unprecedented trial. It's been a trial like no other, and it's left an indelible mark on those who were there. Arthur Denouveau, head of the NGO Life for Paris, says he'll never forget an audio recording of the shooting at the Bataclan played out by the court.
The presiding judge played a clip from inside the Bataclan where you can hear one of my friends reply to the hostage taker. It was like going through a time tunnel, being inside the courtroom and hearing this clip that no one had heard. It reminded me that during this massive judicial process, there were nonetheless these intimate moments.
Defense lawyers spent 2 weeks delivering their closing arguments to the court. Nigar Ayeri, a lawyer for Mohamed Amri, remembers how some of the plaintiffs shared their food with the defendants, a rare moment of kinship between victims and the accused.
We asked the presiding judge if we could give them food, because we had cakes and sweets on hand. And exceptionally, Judge Pariez accepted. Afterwards, I was even told that some of the victims had offered the defendants food too. It's incredible. It's something that would only happen in this kind of trial.
Closing arguments for the victims took 9 days. Whilst some lawyers delivered their statements one by one, others did something unprecedented, a collective closing argument organised by themes such as love.
When I spoke of love, of sexual prejudice, and the way in which the Islamic State group took advantage of young men's sexual misery, they're obviously subjects I would never have tackled in such detail had I made my own closing arguments.
Legal experts say the trial will serve as a model for similar criminal cases well into the future. This September, the special courtroom will be the setting of the trial into the 2016 attack in Nice, which is expected to last 3 months.
And we're in the company of Madeleine Schwartz, journalist who's been writing for the London Review of Books, the New York Review of Books, covering the trial almost on a daily basis?
I've been coming since the beginning, yeah.
Since the beginning. Also with us, Guillaume Denoy de Saint-Marc, a pleasure to see you, founder of the Association of the French Victims of Terrorism.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And you've been with us throughout these 7 years, we could say, to a certain degree.
Yes, from the very beginning, yes.
Thanks to both of you. Madeleine, you were just inside the courthouse. Tell us.
Well, the mood is one of anticipation. I have never seen the courthouse more full. There are people who have come from all over France, I would say all over the world even, to hear the verdict and to hear what the court will say about these accused.
There was a feeling of... It was a mixed feeling when we were speaking to people online earlier, going in about the fact that this is it, this is the final day.
Well, I think that for a lot of victims, and of course I don't want to speak for them, but in their testimony, many of them have talked about the feeling of closure with this trial, that this is the end of years of thinking about this attack and what it means, and that after this trial, it's unclear what comes next.
Unclear what comes next. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, Guillaume Denoy de Saint-Marc, when you think back, 7 years, and we get to this day. Is this what you expected?
Yes, because it was a fantastic trial. Fantastic because it was difficult to organize, and it has been organized properly. Difficult because there were persons in the accused person. Some of the key persons were there. Salah Abdeslam, for example, but also other persons, and it's very important to know what everyone did and how involved everyone was or not involved. So there are different cases, so it makes it's very rich. We could hear to all the civil parts, all the victims could speak, and what they said was really strong. And they passed away. They were not in a victimized position as they were at the very beginning 7 years ago. They were much more intellectual, even if there was a lot of feelings. But there was no anger, no vengeance. It was very instructive to hear them 7 years after what happened.
We're used to dealing with breaking news where it's the day of and tempers are flaring. And what Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc says is what everyone has been saying, that nobody who has followed this trial closely, we spoke to one woman who was there for 125 of the 150 days. She says, of course, my views have changed.
Well, I think that one of the particularities of this trial has been that it has been so long, and which means that there has been a lot of change, I think, both for the civil parties and for the accused. We have seen over the course of this trial a tremendous amount of change from Salah Abdeslam, who is, of course, the main accused, who started out claiming his allegiance to ISIS and ended the trial crying and asking for forgiveness.
And you point out in your writing that at no point does he express remorse. He asks forgiveness, but he doesn't express remorse.
Well, I think, I don't know that any of us could really understand what's going on in his head. And to be honest, watching him, he has often oscillated. And even the two psychologists who came to talk about their analysis of him discussed that he oscillates between two positions, that of the hardened ISIS soldier and that of the little guy, this is their words, the little guy from Molenbeek. And we've really seen that throughout the trial as he's gone back and forth.
Is it black and white in this case, Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc?
No, everything is gray, and what is good is we had time to see the gray zone of everything. And I also think about the three perpetrators or accused that were not in jail. Maybe they're going to be sentenced for jail, but anyway, it's also important that to see that also their voice was listened and their case was analyzed very precisely. And it was very important for the victims to know everything about everything and all the details. And there were a lot of, I would say, humanity in all that. Humanity of the victims, but humanity also of the accused persons. Sometimes tricky humanity, like for Salah Abdeslam, you don't really know what he really thinks, but at least he could speak up, he could give his voice.
Because he could have not spoken.
He could have not spoken. I know that it's our lawyer who made him speak, because we created empathy with him, and it was a way to bring him back to humanity. It's a starting point. I think it's not finished, but at least there is a beginning of a process. And that's what is very important. We bring back the histories of each individual and not the history of a group, which is completely different.
Do you feel, and it'll be my final question for you, do you feel as though this is being viewed as the trial of all those that are in the box, or is it Salah Abdeslam who's the sole focus?
No, it's a trial of all of them, and all of them individually. And I'm sure that the sentences will be very different for each one. And I hope, our hope is that there is a very big difference between the different sentences, which will show that the trial really looked at each case separately.
Is it doable? I was just giving the guy a lift to the airport. I didn't know. What do you say when that?
No, but anyway, there are proofs, there are evidence, and everybody should be condemned through what he effectively did or we think he did, but not of everything, not of murder. This person were not murderers. They took part. They took a part. They have to be acquainted for what they did, but only on what they did.
All right, Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc, thank you for being with us. Just a few more questions with you. Madeleine Schwartz, the interesting thing here is this isn't like a... as Guillaume Dunois de Saint-Marc was saying, they're not all facing the same charges. This isn't like one of those big... It's not a Nuremberg trial. It's not a crimes against humanity trial. This is different people with varying degrees of culpability or not.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the reasons that the trial has been so interesting. You have someone on one extreme, like Abdeslam, who is the only surviving member of the commando that actually attacked Paris, and then on the other hand, you have these three accused who have come to the court freely every morning because they're not currently incarcerated, and who have even gone out, during the breaks and smoked cigarettes with the victims. And so it's a wide variety of accused who will no doubt get a wide variety of sentencing from tonight.
Wide variety of sentencing. Guillaume de Saint-Marc, I'm told you're expected on our French set, so I want to thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right. The question I had for you on this score is the expectations that this is a trial for history, right? Now, I'm old enough to remember the Klaus Barbie trial, but that was the trial of an old man. Here, the main suspect is 32 years old. Is it a trial for history?
Well, that is certainly the way it has been set up, and it would be hard to not think about that just by virtue of the size of the trial. So here we're standing in front of the courthouse, where a specially built courtroom was built just to accommodate the many, many people who were planning to come and to accommodate these many victims. One tension that there has been in the courtroom is whether we should be looking at it historically or whether we should be looking at it, as many of the lawyers have said, like any other trial, looking at the facts, not thinking what will people think about this in 50 years, but thinking, okay, can we prove that the accused did these things or not, and where do we go from there?
We're in a criminal trial, the way you describe it. That's a far cry from what the French president said on the night of November 13th when he said France is at war.
Well, the French presidents came to the trial to express many of those,
the former president.
Many of those same sentiments, and his appearance at the trial was very hotly debated, and many people in the courtroom did not want to hear from him, most notably the lawyers for the defense. One thing I think that makes a terrorism trial of this sort so complicated is that you have such violence. And then at the end of the day, what the judge will have to do, what he is no doubt doing right now, the judges are looking at what did each particular accused do in the most specific way. And so at the one hand, they have had to look at things globally and with the most amount of detail possible.
And we're still trying to make sense of this rampage. Madeleine Schwartz, I want to thank you so much. I know you have to get back inside for the verdict.
Thank you so much.
And we hope you'll come back out and join us once it's over.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Madeleine Schwartz. And it's the culmination of 10 months of trial. Everybody in this city, in this country, remembers what they were doing on that Friday, the 13th of November, 2015. It was an unseasonably warm evening for November in the French capital when this rampage that took place in 4 different places began.
It's Friday, November 13th, 2015. A night of horror has just begun. The first attack happened outside France's national stadium, when 2 suicide bombers blew themselves up within 10 minutes of each other. A third suicide attack took place less than half an hour later. President François Hollande, who was in the stadium attending a friendly match with Germany, was taken to safety. At the same time, more attacks were taking place in the centre of the French capital. Gunmen shot at a cafe and restaurant on the Rue Alibert in the 10th arrondissement. Minutes later, they opened fire on the Rue de la Fontaine-au-Roi and Rue de Charonne in the 11th.
Il y avait du sang partout, les gens sont tombés comme des mouches. C'était une vraie scène de guerre. J'avais l'impression d'être dans les tranchées.
But the biggest attack of the evening began when 3 terrorists burst into the Bataclan concert hall and opened fire with automatic weapons. They were targeting 1,500 people attending a rock concert. A journalist for Le Monde who lived next door filmed some of the concert-goers escaping via a back door and others hanging from windows desperately trying to get free. Some of those stuck inside hid in groups where they could. 2 police officers arrived and killed one of the terrorists on the ground floor. The 2 others were upstairs. They had taken hostages. At that point, French special forces moved in. They secured the ground floor and survivors filed out.
On était tous allongés et là j'ai vu qu'en fait ils tiraient de partout et donc là c'est l'instinct de survie où on est tous au sol, on bouge pas, on voudrait rentrer dans le sol pour pas qu'on nous voie.
Les uns sur les autres recroquevillés à entendre tous les coups de Kalachnikov, les gens comme si les gens se faisaient torturer, les gens avaient mal parce que se faisaient tirer dessus. C'était une boucherie, c'était un carnage, des gens morts partout et voilà.
The French president spoke to the nation just before midnight.
Mes chers compatriotes, au moment où je m'exprime, des attaques terroristes d'une ampleur sans précédent sont en cours dans l'agglomération parisienne. Il y a plusieurs dizaines de tués. Il y a beaucoup de blessés. C'est une horreur.
After trying to negotiate, French forces stormed the two terrorists holding hostage concert-goers. The operation ended 21 minutes after midnight, after 3 hours of bloodshed. They were the deadliest attacks in France since the Second World War.
Well, joining us is journalist, documentary filmmaker Paul Morera, Première Ligne Productions. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, François.
Lightning strikes twice in your case because the offices of your company are next door to Charlie Hebdo in January of 2015 when the Charlie Hebdo attacks happened, targeting the cartoonists and there. And then this year, the outset of the trial, you were the target of another attack, a case of mistaken identity.
Yes, it was 25 September 2020, and it was a guy from Pakistan that he typed in Google Charlie Hebdo because they republished the caricature, and he just came with an axe and axed the two first people he met that were working for us, thinking that they were working for Charlie Hebdo. So we left the building. It's kind of it became kind of a dangerous place.
It's interesting because those two attacks illustrate as well how things have changed. On the one hand, as you say, this makeshift act, we don't know if he had accomplices or not, and the other, this sophisticated operation with people who, by the way, there are people on trial who may or may not have died in Syria. So it's like this whole logistical big operation in 2015 to these sort of homemade acts of violence.
Exactly. I think it says it all. I mean, I don't think Daesh could ever do an attack, this magnitude in France or in either place. And nowadays what we have to fear is the lost wolves, the lone wolves that can improvise some kind of attack. I don't think the guy who attacked us was in any way backed by a network or whatever. He was just nuts and didn't want to go back to Pakistan and decided to inflict some. He was not from Daesh. He was from some Sufi sect from Pakistan. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the terrorism is going to evolve into something very DIY type of menace now.
So what is this trial about for you?
For me, it's really crucial because it's a moment. My feeling is after all those attacks that we have kind of withdrawn from facing them and from taking them into account and examining them. And basically there have been very few, like, let's say, fictions, for example, very few fictions on jihad. They are Swedish, they are British, but France has done almost nothing.
Why?
I think there's what we call refouler in French, which is, to take back your emotions, denial, and try to look somewhere else, because the level of trauma was so high that it was, for any society, you're not keen to observe what happened. But I think that's what we should do if we want to overcome it. And that's what happened. Somehow during this trial, we have seen incredible people telling their story. We have seen also the terrorists. Some of them evolve. I don't know how genuine it is, but that's what they say, that they realize something really grave happened on this evening. So yeah, I think we do need to face this event.
And so this trial taking place, we're, by the way, if you're joining us live here on France 24, the verdict, which has been pushed back by at least a couple of hours, because it's taken the magistrates a long time to deliberate after the final statements that were submitted on Monday. This period of reflection prolonged, and these 10 months, 150 courtroom sessions, is it today more about the trial or more about November the 13th, 2015?
No, I think it's about the day that this happened. I think we have to revisit this day. We have to understand what triggered guys who were born in Europe and second generation, third generation to feel so at odds with their own society that they would commit such fanatic and crazy murdering spread in the middle of Paris and other places, because it happened in Brussels also. So I think we have to keep revisiting.
Are we any closer to understanding that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what we could understand is that these people had lost touch with reality because they were totally fascinated by this possibility that there would be the superpower in Raqqa, in Syria, that the caliphate, also, the propaganda of Daesh was very, very well crafted and very seducing, and so we understood one thing, is that what Raqqa and the caliphate meant for them was crucial. That's one of the reasons why because they had this hope that something powerful was building up, something that would be an alternative to their own lives. And this alternative is gone. And I think it won't happen again.
So military defeat in Syria and Iraq has played a big factor.
I think military defeat of Daesh has meant symbolic erasure of the hope of a big caliphate that would go all the way to Rome. I don't know if you remember, but they had those scholastic, scatologic visions that an apocalypse would come and they would take all the planet. So when guys are a bit weak in their head and deranged, they can be attracted by such
vulnerable
discourse.
People who are attracted by this kind of ideology. You get the sense that while a big operation like Daesh has been dealt a big blow, the world seems like, in some instances, a more radical place. It's the more polarized, more far right attacks that we've seen recently in the United States and elsewhere. It's not just Islam.
Yeah, no, I think obviously the numbers talk for themselves. Is that statistically now the problem is more far rightists than Islam people. Again, I think it's because the option disappeared, and but nevertheless, I think Daesh and ISIS have played a huge role in having this authoritarian streak appearing in our societies, where they have radicalized also far rightist groups. I mean, we all know that they're based mostly on fighting Islam and all, and ISIS is much responsible for that growth.
Paul Moreira, many thanks for helping us to make sense of this.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. Pleasure as always here on France 24.
Thank you, François.
For the victims, it's, again, as Paul was saying, about making sense of what happened on that night back in 2015. Here's just one example.
September 2021, Nancy had no lawyer. She wasn't a registered plaintiff. Even her COVID vaccine wasn't valid in France. But she knew she had to travel to Paris. Her son, Luis Felipe, was killed at the Bataclan 6 years before, and a trial had just begun. Since then, the Chilean mother found a Spanish-speaking lawyer and a temporary home.
¿Nicola o Nicolás?
Nicola.
Nicola.
A hotel financed by the French state.
Esta gente me ha acogido súper bien. Bueno, por tanto tiempo.
Everyone has been very welcoming since I've been here. They've been very, very caring. I tell them that I'm here for the trial and that I needed to stay for a long time. They asked me why, and I told them my story.
Y bueno, me preguntaron por qué, qué sé yo. Entonces,
The attacks are still fresh in their memory, too. They were all very affected by what happened.
Todos fueron muy afectados por esto.
On her desk, books and newspapers all about this unprecedented trial, gifted to Nancy by a police officer, her interpreter, and the mother of another victim.
I've gathered a lot of information on how the attack took place at the Bataclan concert hall, how the terrorist entered. I can imagine how my son died, and it's horrible.
Nancy followed the proceedings religiously, attending almost every day of the trial. She only took a break once to travel back to Chile and meet her newborn grandson. Even before the end, she was already disappointed with the prosecutor's sentencing requests.
I came with major expectations. Expectations that all these boys will never get out of prison, because I think everyone who is guilty of anything, small or big, they all contributed to this.
Nancy might know more about the attacks, the suspects, and the legal proceedings than when she first arrived. But for her and others like her, there are still many unanswered questions.
No cameras allowed in the courtroom for this historic trial. There are, of course, sketch artists appointed by the court, and the graphic novel is the weapon of choice for Anne-Judy Celli. Thank you for being with us. You've published November 11th, excuse me, 1311 reenactment of an attack. The illustrations are by Luc Brailly. Thank you for being with us. We're also in the company of France 24's very own Andrew Hillier. I'm going to get to you in a moment, Andrew, for an update on the latest inside. We're still waiting for the verdicts to start coming in for all those that are in the dock. Anne-Judy Celli, we just heard this woman, Nancy from Chile, put up by the French state. She's probably in the courtroom behind us. I didn't spot her on the long line here before. Your thoughts on what these last 10 months have meant for the victims?
Well, it's what is the most important in that process is the trial, much more than the verdict, because those people they really changed during those 10 months, but also the defendants, as we have seen with Salah Abdeslam. So
for you, Salah Abdeslam has changed?
Yes.
Because there's doubts. We don't know what's in his head.
It changes, let's say, his narrative. That doesn't mean it changes inside. It's my view, let's say. I'm not sure that he deeply regrets.
This trial, the 10 months to be able to go over in minutiae of what happened with this rampage, which you chronicle in your comic book, in your graphic novel, excuse me. The attack on the Stade de France, the attack in the cafes in the east of Paris, the Bataclan concert hall, of course, where 90 people died. Have you, in the last 10 months, made more sense of it all? This is your area of expertise as an academic.
Well, it's a very good question, because you know that for this graphic book I had access to many information that were linked to the investigations, and so it was 3 years ago. And finally I haven't learned a lot about the pending and the remaining question that already at that time the investigation had raised. So it's the reason why I said that this trial is much more important than what really we learn about the facts, about what really happened during that night. And the key question is now to know how the prosecutor will decide and the judge will identify who is guilty of what exactly.
A very difficult decision to make. We had many victims telling us, Andrew Hillier, that they hope this isn't going to be a mass trial, but rather the trial, as one woman said to me, of 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 of all those that are in the dock.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the sense we've got from a lot of the survivors and the victims' families that we've been speaking to today is that they don't want this to turn into basically just one big. They want each individual to be judged on an individual basis, of course. And the other thing is that what these survivors are saying is that this isn't the end of the road, obviously. This is obviously a big moment, a landmark moment in French history, and it's also a key moment for them. But, you know, what I think the key phrase I got today was, we're not turning the page, we're turning a page. So, and this is simply because this is only a small step on the long road to healing. You know, survivors have said they felt relief that this is all coming to an end. It's been exhausting. You know, it's gone on for 9 months, and it hasn't been easy for the survivors and victims' families being in there listening in excruciating detail to some of the testimony that's come out. So obviously, you know, a huge moment for them. But
and yet you had people who said they weren't going to show up. At the beginning, I think there were something like 1,800 plaintiffs. The numbers grew as the trial went on.
Yeah, so we started off with about 1,800 plaintiffs. Now there's well over 2,500 plaintiffs, and that's because obviously as the trial's gone on, more and more people have stepped up and decided to lodge complaints with the court. And I want to make one point as well. One of the survivors, he's a spokesman for an NGO, Paris for Life. What he said to us today was, please don't forget, you know, we've seen survivors and victims, those who have come to the court, but there's many people that you don't remember who are by themselves, who are far from Paris, who've been listening to this via, for example, the web radio system that's been set in place. They don't have access to psychologists, and they if you will, they've been suffering in silence. So, you know, the message here is don't forget those victims as well.
And we certainly at France 24 don't forget Mathieu Hoche. He was a sound engineer on our show on the night. He went to that Eagles of Death Metal concert, unfortunately never to emerge. Andrew, give us a news update, if you will. We were supposed to have a verdict by now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we remember originally the proceedings were supposed to get underway at about 5 p.m. That's almost 3 hours ago. The last we heard, the courtroom is completely packed full. That's the specially built main courthouse with the capacity of around
You should tell the viewer that we have spies inside. We have France 24's Karim Hakiki.
We do have France 24's Karim Hakiki, who is sending us a steady update from inside the courthouse. And the last thing he told was that the courtroom was packed, but the verdicts still haven't been read out. So we're still waiting to find out when that's going to happen.
All right, still waiting to find out when that's going to happen. How do you explain this delay, Anjuli Chedi?
Well, it was expected, you know, for such a trial. I mean, it's a mass trial for a mass crime, so it's a very, very sensitive and crucial end of a 10 months period of hearings and so on and so on. So I think that we have some issues that are very, very complicated to decide, and even within the juries that they have their role, so they have a big pressure on them, on their shoulders. So that explains, I guess, the reason why the decision is so hard to take that it takes a lot of time.
We had, over the years, the form and the brands of radical groups change.
Yeah.
There was Afghanistan, and there was Al-Qaeda, then there was ISIS. Today, what does radicalness look like?
It's very diversified. I'm just coming back.
I don't know if that's a word, radicalness, but I'm using it.
Even the term of radical has so many meanings. But I was just in the Sahel region a few days ago, and you have a common ground for terrorism, for radicalization, radicalized groups, but you have very different expression of it, and even in the Middle East or in Africa or in Europe or in the United States, you have a very specified way of groups are radicalized, the motivation,
because we have, for
modus operandi and
right.
so on. Yeah.
We have, for instance, those who brand themselves as jihadists, it's meddled into issues between farmers and herders in West Africa. We also have radical. This has nothing to do with religion itself. I mean, the far right is on the rise in places like the United States.
So, there is one common frame, let's say, that for all those groups, whatever the location is that the religion is a frame, precisely, it's a global frame in which you build your moral, you build your values, and the rest has to be adapted to the area, the environment where you live. That's it.
So it's always the chicken and egg question for academics like yourself. Is it a radicality or radicalness in search of a religion, or a religion in search of a radicalness? I know that sounds a bit intellectual on a day like this one, but it is a question, because you get the sense with this trial that things have changed a lot since 2015.
Yeah, sure. The way how I mean, there is some common triggers, of course, but terrorism is evolving as the society is evolving. It's a part of the society. So you cannot disconnect our own evolution and the global evolution, disconnect to their own evolution, because they always adapt. Even they anticipate on us. They have this capacity. They understand very well what our weakness.
All right, and Judy Chetty, I want to thank you again. The graphic novel, is in French, soon in English?
No, I hope so.
You hope so.
Please,
okay.
If you want to translate
November
it.
November 11th, reconstitution of an attack. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
France 24's Andrew Hillier. Modus operandi, when they start reading the verdicts, how long do we then wait?
I mean, it could take anything from up to between 2 and 3 hours, I think, to get through all the verdicts. But I mean, it looks. All we know is it could be a long night.
It could be a long night. Okay. And remember, as we said at the outset, there is one face of this trial, and that is the lone survivor of the commando that killed 130 on the night, Salah Abdeslam. But there are many others in the box.
A total of 20 men suspected of playing key roles in the November 2015 Paris terrorist attacks, 14 of them in the dock. In Paris's special criminal courtroom, 14 of the surviving men were tried for their involvement on the night of November 13th. Among them, the sole survivor of the 3 gangs of jihadists who staged attacks across Paris, Salah Abdeslam. Also on trial, men aged between 28 and 39, including Abdeslam's childhood friend Mohamed Abrini, dubbed the Man in the Hat. Abrini was accused of having provided weapons and logistical support during the November attacks, before fleeing to Belgium, where he decided at the last minute not to blow himself up during the March 2016 attacks in Brussels. These defendants were prosecuted for several crimes, including participation in a terrorist organisation, complicity in murder, complicity in attempted murder, and complicity in attempted murder of individuals holding posts of public authority. The public prosecutor called for a full life term for Abdeslam, a sentence which has been imposed only 4 times in France since 2007. For Abrini, prosecutors have called for a life sentence with a minimum 22-year prison term. Lighter sentences of 5 years in prison were demanded for those accused of having helped Abdeslam escape, and 6 men were tried in absentia. Of these, 5 are believed to be dead, among them Oussama Attar, considered to be one of the architects of the massacre, as well as IS members Fabien and Jean-Michel Cain. The length of the trial and the number of the plaintiffs have made it the most impactful legal case in French history.
And with us now, France 24's Wassim Nasser, who monitors jihadi networks around the globe. And if I remember correctly, back in 2015, you had quite a few scoops just by following the chatter that they were putting out, these groups. Today, what we're seeing is the unraveling of, as Paul Moreira was telling us earlier, of a big operation in Syria, in Belgium, here in France, and other places. Is it still possible today to have this kind of a big operation like we saw in 2015?
Well, we have to remember that it is quite exceptional. It is the first time that the Islamic State succeeded in doing so, and it is the only time that they succeeded in doing so. Because if you talk about the attacks in Belgium, which occurred a few months after the 30th of November, in March, if I recall well, it was the same cell, it was the same group. So the thing is that such groups as the Islamic State or as Al-Qaeda don't get to have such crews all the time. What permitted this in 2015, that they had a sanctuary in Syria, and they were able to attract so many Europeans in the ranks, and even Americans and Westerners as a whole. Hundreds of them joined the ranks of the Islamic State. And this is how they succeeded in forming this crew and making it go back to Europe and hit Europe. They went in with the refugees, as you remember, and they knew how to move in Europe discreetly, because they were Europeans, they were French and Belgian citizens before everything. And this is how they got to buy arms. This is how they got to have hideouts, because they knew the territory that they were going to attack. And this is, one more time, quite exceptional. Today, the Islamic State doesn't have a sanctuary so close to Europe as was the case for Syria. We don't have the same flow of refugee, and the most important thing, they don't have enough skilled Europeans in their ranks to conduct such a kind of attacks.
Are you happy with the way the French government now is, well, the French judicial system is turning this into a rule of law question?
Well, that's a very crucial point because this was a point that the French government and the French judicial and the French system as a whole had to make, like to put the emphasis on the fact that they were not judging the Islamic State. They were judging individuals that acted on the orders of the Islamic State. So each judgment and each verdict will be regarding the person that is being judged, because they are not like trying to satisfy the public opinion. They are not trying to make dogmatic decisions or judgments. There are real trials where the defendants have their own lawyers, and where it's like a triangle. You have the right of the state to conduct such trials, you have the right of the defenders, and you have the right of the victims. And this is an equilibrium between all those three factors in order to have the last or the verdict that will come up in a few hours or minutes.
Different verdicts for different defendants. Wasim Nasser, thank you. Stay with us. Our live coverage from Paris Central Courts of the Paris attacks trial verdict continues.